mark things randomly as they come through that I like, right? And so I have a list of different things that I find interesting that I'm going to bring in. So I will be turning off comments shortly. There is the YouTube channel that is open and would board as well. And the live is streaming over there. If you would like to go over there and comment, if you have questions, I will turn comments back on, but it makes it easier for me and it makes it easier for everybody else if they're not on full time because, there's a lot of trolls in these spaces, unfortunately. And so, oh shit, did that. Sorry, I think that froze me. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn them off. Again, we will see that they are turned back on later on. And that, excuse the grand cat. I will turn them back on later on. Questions are important. This will probably not be a very long live today. Again, I'm coming in late because of morning shit, but I have other things going on today as well. So their latest finds are showing that Neanderthals actually almost went extinct a couple of times. Now, many people don't understand that there's a separation between climate change that is natural and happens, okay, and cycles, and actual climate destruction. Currently, we're in a phase where we're not only going through a climate change phase of a global cooling phase, but we're also going through heavy climate destruction caused by Western agriculture and caused by extraction from the earth, right? And so these two things really change the environment that we're in and are currently causing oxygen issues, right? But we have gone through climate change. We have gone through cycles of climatic change throughout the history of our planet. These are global warming and cooling phases, glaciation phases. You'll reach max glaciation and minimum glaciation. We've been in a minimum glaciation, and now we're getting to an ultra minimum glaciation. And so we should actually be entering into a max glaciation phase. We should actually be going into a global cooling phase, but because of the stuff that we're causing and we're doing, we're not. So in these cycles, Neanderthals developed. We're only here for 300,000 years. Neanderthals were here for 600,000 years, or rather 570,000 years, because they die out about 30,000 years ago. And being here for roughly 570,000 years. They went through about 3 glaciation periods. There's one ending as they start to develop, and then there is 2 more through the cycle of their life, right? And what we see is that they even leave right as the last one is ending, is where they end up dying out as a species. What we see is that about 170,000 years ago and then about 100,000 years ago, during 2 max glaciation periods, we see that Neanderthals almost become extinct in these 2 different times. The first one at 170,000 years, they're moving out of their northern latitudes into the southern latitudes. Neanderthals, again, speciate in the northern latitudes. They speciate in northwest Eurasia. And so they're moving out of the latitudes that they're natural in, and they're moving into these southern latitudes that they're not as natural in. Some have been there for long periods of time. I mean, there are already peoples, on the Iberian Peninsula. But as the glaciation is coming, these groups that are up north are moving south into areas that people are already in, right? But they're not getting enough. Right? They're not getting enough food. They're not getting enough of the things that they need because they're in the middle of this ice age, right? And so we see that their population sizes shrink. And how we can tell this is they're looking at DNA. And what they're looking at is DNA in the soil with this. They have a new test that they're doing. We've talked in here about carbon-14 dating, and carbon-14 dating basically just takes or in some instances, we were talking about it in regards to the pyramid structure in Indonesia. Well, in this pyramid structure in Indonesia, what they did is like a tube of the earth, and then they carbon-14 dated the layers in the tube of the earth. Well, so they're doing a similar thing with different sites that we know Neanderthals were in. And what they're doing is they're sampling the earth, and they're doing tubes of the earth, and they're roughly, I'm not exactly sure, the spot on technique. And then they're testing those for DNA because they're now able to pull DNA out of the earth. Okay, this new testing. This is coming out of Max Planck Institute. This is the institute that Svante Pablo, the man who just won the Nobel Peace Prize for his DNA advancements and his ability to sequence ancient DNA. Um, and so this is all coming out of the most highest, top-notch, cutting-edge research. Um, this testing has allowed them to see that there are different mitochondrial and Y DNAs that were there, that were gone, and more came up. So if you have mitochondrial DNA being your mother's line and Y DNA being the direct male line, male to male to male to male, right? Everybody gets the mitochondrial, only males get the Y. So if you have, say, 10 mitochondrial DNAs, let's go 1 through 10, mitochondrial 1 through 10, though they're usually with like L and M. And you have 10 or 5 Y DNAs, right? And of those 5 Y DNAs, let's call these Y DNAs A through C, okay? A, B, C, D, E, A through E. I'm so good at this. Um, so if you reach this stage where your population is decreasing, out of those 10 mitochondrial DNAs, you might lose 8 of them and maintain 2 mitochondrial DNAs. And out of those 5 Y DNAs, you might lose 3 of them and maintain 2 Y DNAs. They're seeing that to come back from the first time, they actually come back without a Y DNA that's a Neanderthal Y DNA. That they're actually coming back from the first time, losing the Neanderthal Y DNA and replacing the Neanderthal Y DNA with the Homo sapien Y. So this is a first instance of interbreeding. And this instance of interbreeding is between Neanderthal women and Homo sapien men. And so as they are passing on the genetics in this extremely early mix, the ones that live, the ones that pass on are the males of a Neanderthal woman and a Homo sapien man, which is replacing the Y DNA line of the Neanderthal Y DNA with the Homo sapien Y DNA. And this is why we're not finding a Neanderthal Y DNA. We only have about 23 ancient hominins that we've been able to sequence DNA from. And of those, 18 are Neanderthal, and all the ones that we've been able to sequence don't seem to have a Y DNA. They all seem to have mitochondrial DNA. So they all seem to be women or female. So this tells us that this population not only shrinks almost to completely gone, but that their masculine DNA is replaced by Homo sapiens masculine DNA. And so when Neanderthal and Homo sapiens meet later on in the Levant area, my other camera is moving, that's a little weird. When Neanderthals and Homo sapiens meet later on in the Levant area, we see that this goes a different way, right? So this is one reason we think that maybe we don't see any Neanderthal Y DNA in us. But another reason that we think that we don't see any Neanderthal Y DNA within us is the possibility that the mating between Neanderthal and Homo sapien, the children that were able to be fertile and pass on to the next generation, were Neanderthal women and Homo sapien men. This would give us the idea that you're only getting this one way of interaction, which actually happens. But there's also the knowledge that we're getting Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA in. So, or a Homo sapien mitochondrial DNA staying in. So it could be a little bit weird. It could be that the prior one was only Neanderthal men or Neanderthal women and Homo sapien men. And then the next one was only Neanderthal men who carried the Homo sapien Y and Homo sapien women. We don't know for sure, but we do see that they almost went extinct twice before they went extinct. The next time that they almost go to extinct is at 100,000 years ago. And this is where they start really interbreeding with Homo sapien and with Homo denisovian, because we also see that they mix with Homo denisovian. In fact, the one hybrid that we have of 2 different species is the child of a denisovian mother and a Neanderthal father, right? Did I get that backwards? I might have gotten that backwards. I've said it a few times in here, so I know I've said it right before. This really shows us that this interbreeding really kind of gives the Neanderthal the ability to really maintain. If you know that you're a genetically in diverse group, becoming extremely inbred, you're going to go outside to get new genetics so that you don't mutate, so that you don't have problems, right? We see this in incestuous families that, like, we see this in the pharaonic families. We see this in later ruling families as well, where we see families becoming extremely inbred. The Habsburg jaw is an extremely good example. Akhenaten is thought to have been so inbred that that's why he has a long skull and his body has the feminine proportions, and why Tutankhamun had so many physiological problems, right? So we see that when people are becoming really inbred, they start to understand that they need to get some outside genetics. So we would see that Neanderthal becoming really inbred, being actually, hey, beautiful, being actually a pretty advanced group of people, anyways, is most likely to look for outside genetics so that they can continue themselves as a species. And in fact, they do continue themselves as a species. There is more Neanderthal DNA on the planet alive today than there ever was during the entirety of their species, because during the entirety of their species reign of about 600,000 years, we see that the estimates are that there's only 500,000 Neanderthal of the entirety of the species over that entire 600,000 years, right? So, pardon me, there's an alarm going off in my background. So, if we're looking at that, what we're seeing is that there is absolutely more DNA on this planet today from Neanderthals than there ever was during their lifespan. I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions on Neanderthal. Hey, beautiful, thank you. Before I go into the next segment, which will be the Australians raising cassowaries, which are large birds that can actually like kill you. It's kind of cool. At 18,000 years ago. We will go over the last three things on this list. The only thing that we have gone over so far is Neanderthal. So if you want to answer question or ask questions on the last three lists, I'm going to hold them until I get into those subjects. I ask that you don't use racism or phobias based on gender and desire in my room, in my space, because I have huge problems with both of those. And you're not going to really like my response. And I really don't like to have to deal with them. So if you have any questions on the Neanderthals and the extinction, let me know. So why there's more Neanderthal DNA now than there was back then, Nubian, is a beautiful question. It's because pretty much everyone on the planet has Neanderthal DNA. There's only two spaces in Africa that don't have Neanderthal DNA. And there's 8 billion people, right? So even if like everybody only has 1% Neanderthal DNA, like we average it all out to everybody only has 1%, 1% times 8 billion is still more than 100% times 500,000. So it's really just the fact that there's so many people with Neanderthal DNA within them. Um, so it's a problem with books on this topic is a lot of stuff is outdated by the time it's published. That's why I kind of recommend journal articles on new archaeology. Most stuff really gets outdated so quickly. But I do have a couple of books that I think I'm putting up. I'm trying to get a couple books up on there. I would say Ancestors is a really good one, but I think Ancestors doesn't go into Neanderthal. I'll have to take a deeper look. For thought and process, GNAM Alls or children's series is really great as long as you understand that certain things about it are outdated. Like to give you an idea of who people were, it's a really great idea, but you have to understand that they actually were able to communicate. You know, they actually had vocal language, and that some of the things that were associated at that time are now outdated. So, um, we have Neanderthal DNA in us and Denisovian DNA in us. And then we have what we call ghost species, which are species that we see just a little fingerprint of their genome in our DNA. And we have 5 ghost species. We don't know who these species are. We don't have a full genome of them, and we haven't found them yet, DNA wise, or in the fossil record, DNA wise. Like it could be that, you know, there's like maybe Naladi is one of them, right? We do know that the 2 spaces within Africa that do not have Neanderthal DNA, which are the only spaces on the planet that don't have Neanderthal DNA, have 3 ghost species within them. There's the ghost species in Turtle Island Indigenous people and a ghost species in Australian Indigenous people. Maybe the Neanderthal women were sick to death of Neanderthal men, though I wonder, did they think Homo sapien men were a lot better? So everybody has Neanderthal DNA. So, the Canaanites actually come from a region where Neanderthal and Homo sapien lived side by side for 100,000 years in two caves. This is where the vast majority of the mixing between Neanderthal and Homo sapien happened, and this is in the Levant area. So that area is really the history of this mixing. So having a higher percentage of DNA from Neanderthals in that area or from people who come out of that area would actually be sensible. Absolutely. I don't think it's my camera. I think it's just the Neanderthals do have verbal language. We know that. But well, they weren't considered mixed people. They were just and nobody even thought of the word of mixed until recently, right? Oh, and yes, I blaspheme all the time. I encourage blasphemization. We should all blaspheme more. The Levant area, Maggie. So, So if you look on the link tree in my bio, there are studies that show Neanderthal DNA in all of Africa, except for a couple spaces. I do not remember which group of people in West Africa does not have Neanderthal DNA, though I do know it is in West Africa. And I believe it is the Khoisan population within South Africa that does not have Neanderthal DNA. It is true about Europe. I'm absolutely, if you can show me where I'm wrong, I might listen to you. Um, but oh, you mean the last statement? We haven't even gotten to that one, sweetheart. You should stick around, but I'm absolutely correct about the fact that Europe was mainly black until 5,000 years ago. Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and turn off the comments. I'm going to turn them into subscriber only comments for now so that I can read back through some of these questions and answer them. Okay, so I'm trying to get back to where I saw the last one. Okay. Okay, so I think I got Nubians and the books. No, there's no evidence that Homo sapien ate Neanderthal. The question is, did Homo sapiens eat Neanderthal? There's no evidence of violence between Homo sapiens and Neanderthal at all. I don't think so. The question is, do I think they were aware of genetics? I don't think they were aware of genetics like we're aware of genetics, but they're aware of ancestry. Animists, and they would have been animistic because they would have believed that they were animals like everything else, right? Animists have a tendency to understand ancestry and family lines, but they don't look at it as genetics like on a microscope scale. Nobody is alien. So the two groups of people that have Neanderthal or that don't have Neanderthal DNA, again, I do not remember the West African population, but the South African population is the Khoisan people. Of these two groups, what you're seeing is not that Neanderthals ever went into Africa or that the groups within Africa that do have Neanderthal DNA ever left Africa. What you see is that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens live side by side in the Levant area in two separate caves that are a 5-minute walk from each other for 100,000 years. This is where we see the vast majority of their intermixing and their interbreeding. And what would happen is you would have them going back up into Europe, the Neanderthals, because they are speciated for Europe. It's their environment. And you would have the Homo sapiens who are speciated for Africa going back into Africa. And so you're taking the Neanderthal genetics with you back into Africa where you're going home and you're visiting grandma or your cousins, right? And you take your child home and then you decide you're going to stay there, right? And you've had this child with a Neanderthal woman. So now this child has the Neanderthal genetics, or with the Neanderthal men. And now this child has the Neanderthal genetics. And so now you see that Neanderthal genetics goes to their grandchildren, right? And so what it is not that Neanderthal ever went into Africa, and not that these groups ever left Africa, but that mixing in the Levant, that kind of admixture that they get in the Levant is carried back into Africa with them when they go back into Africa. So, Kathleen, what 23andMe is stating is that you have more Neanderthal DNA than 8% of humans. Um, this is a really like fuzzy, like they don't, it's not really giving you a whole lot of factual. You can take the GED file from 23andMe and upload it to, there's 3 sites in the very bottom of my link tree that are DNA sites that you can upload that GED file to, and it will give you a better breakdown than Ancestry or 23andMe will. Yeah, clans helps, bands helps. A lot of lineages will be traced matriarchally because of the fact that you don't know who fathers are generally. So you see a lot of matriarchal lineages, and all of those have a tendency to go through. It can be described in several different ways, but it is basically what we would think of as a clan. It is a line, a family group coming down through a matriarchal lineage, and that's typically where you see it. Good morning, Sleepy. And yes, I use journal articles more than I use books just because of how fast stuff goes out of date. Pastor, I think we probably talked. I'm totally down. If we haven't talked, you're more than welcome to contact me. So race doesn't exist, user 2675. So I can't say which race has the most Neanderthal DNA. And I believe that Europe has a high presence of Neanderthal DNA, depending on which ethnicity within Europe and which space that ethnicity was from originally. Like if you're getting in West Eurasia or East Eurasia, you're going to get actually more DNA, and if you're getting into West Eurasia, I believe you get less DNA. So it becomes it's a little bit different. Well, we all have Neanderthal, so Tutankhamun absolutely would have Neanderthal within him. Being in northern Africa and in Egypt, actually, this is a high, heavy spot of Neanderthal mixing in DNA, right? Because it's right outside that Levant area. I did not pretend Cheddar Man was like a lot of modern Black person. This is the recreation, depending or going off of Cheddar Man's genetics, and it is actually the gene associated with the melanin content for sub-Saharan Africa. So this is what they think that he looked like. Um, I know that so many people have an issue with that, but your issue with that is not science doesn't give a shit what your prejudice is, just saying. Like science isn't going to go off of your prejudice. Science says something, and science is going to listen to your prejudice and maybe question what it says, because that's also what science does. It holds accountability and questions shit and questions it again and questions it again, but it really doesn't give a shit what your prejudice thinks. Science says, and this is what science says, and until science says different, we're going with science. Homo florensis is not a mutation. Homo florensis is what we call island dwarfism. If you are in a space that is a low space, low amount of space, low amount of food, and a low amount of large predators, you will shrink to fit that space. This is why we have pygmy elephants alongside Homo florensis, actually. I think that it was inevitable that Neanderthals were going to go extinct. And the reason that I think so is because I think they start with a low genetic diversity, anyways. Um, I think low genetic diversity leads to extinction. But, I also don't believe that they actually went extinct. As a species whole, yes, but because they're still within us, they're not necessarily extinct. They're still here. I'm not sure what you think I'm so far removed from that I can't really have good faith claim that as my heritage. Um, I would state that I have spent several decades studying paleoanthropology, studying Indigenous history across the globe from Indigenous voices across the globe, um, and archaeology. And so, within all of those things, I would say that I probably am not that removed. I would say I'm less removed from a lot of this knowledge than most people are. I also grew up dirt floor. in a tent, in a teepee, actually, in a teepee, in a log cabin. I really grew up very, very primitive in our idea of what primitive is, without running water or electricity. And I grew up learning how to make things from the forest and from the woods. And so for me, like, this is not something I'm actually removed from. I'm currently in a city because I have to be, but I would be in the woods if I could, and I would thrive. You can drop me in the middle of anywhere you like, and I will thrive. You can come back a year later and find a beautiful home with food to feed you because I was raised with that ability. I was raised off grid and backwoods, and so I'm absolutely not removed from any of this. And so, very much in good faith, I claim it as my heritage because I claim it as my actuality in this world today. Awesome, Harris. You're an Arcturian. I'm not sure what that is. Ah, no, I cannot explain the new strand of DNA found specifically in people of Oyo. I have not seen that, but I can look in that. Oh, so this is what we're talking about. DNA analysis of people in West Africa reveals a ghost human ancestor. These are those ghost species that I'm talking about, right? So, as I was saying, we see that there are three ghost species in the two spaces that don't have Neanderthal DNA. And those two spaces, one is in West Africa. So, this is that ghost species in West Africa that we're talking about. Actually, thank you very much for that. I didn't have the actual wordage or the actual name of the group that I could remember and pull it up. And this actually is very helpful. This will go on my thing. But this has got ghost DNA. This is that DNA that we're seeing a little fingerprint of a different species, but we haven't found the whole strand of their DNA to be able to identify who the species is. But it is not alien DNA, and we always want to take it to alien, but it's not. All of it has the same signatures as every other terrestrial DNA. So if we look at a strand of DNA, we can see that our strands of DNA are what is it, 95% similar to bananas? Well, every one of these strands of DNA is 95% similar to bananas, right? So all beings on Earth actually share like 95% of our DNA. This is because we all come from common ancestors. And since we all share like 95% of our DNA, these other beings share 95% of their DNA with other terrestrial beings as well, which shows that they're not alien in nature. We have seen extraterrestrial DNA. We have brought it back from other planets, and we see that it structures differently than our DNA does. We were Neanderthals and sheep. Homo florensis is unlikely to be a ghost genome in us, a ghost DNA. Mainly because, so if the only thing that they could really be is the ghost DNA in Australians, but we see within indigenous Australians that there's a Homo erectus site in Australia, which is probably the ghost DNA within indigenous Australians. The Moyhill site would be a Homo erectus site, and so I don't think that Homo florensis could be that ghost DNA. But we haven't been able to DNA Homo florensis because of the conditions of the body and because of ancient DNA conditions, right? And so it is possible. We don't know for certain. It could be florensis. You know, it's unlikely to me, but it does not mean that it's impossible. You can tell by Canaanite phenotypes, probably. Uh, And yes, Neanderthal have a verbal language, just like Homo erectus has verbal language. We see speech in the base of their skull, the patterning in the base of their skull, and we see it in the chest capacity, their lung capacity. Well, we didn't kill out Homo sapiens, didn't kill out Homo neanderthalis. There was no superior weapon involved. We actually learned different weapons from each other. And it's actually that time that we're in that kind of area in the Levant where we're kind of mixing and stuff that we're also teaching each other different skills. And in that teaching of each other's different skills, what we're doing is adapting our weapon assemblage, our tool assemblage, and they're adapting their tool assemblage. When two cultures meet, they encourage each other to think outside the box, right? And when you live in a box, you live in your own box and you don't see something outside, you don't see different things. But when two cultures meet and they have two different boxes, their boxes kind of impact each other's boxes and encourage you to think of things that you've never thought of before. This area was within the Levant. Thank you. Levant equals Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan, etc. I can't narrow it down further than the Levant because I can't remember the exact space that the caves are within the Levant. The information is in the link tree in my bio. I just can't remember the exact spaces. Just because someone isn't white doesn't mean that they're black. This is true. That's absolutely true. But the genetic markers for sub-Saharan skin tone is found in Cheddarman. This is what it is thought that his skin tone was. I mean, that doesn't mean he's black, but it kind of does mean he's pretty fucking brown, doesn't it? Nobody's actually black anyways, right? Like we're all just shades of brown, right? So the person in the background is Cheddarman. He was, until 6 months ago, our oldest find in Britain. Currently, our oldest find are 13,000 years ago and 14,000 years ago. Cheddarman is 10,000 years ago, and his direct descendant actually lives within a mile of where he was. Our understanding actually is that any genetic or sexual dimorphism, which means the average of one sex is larger than the average of the other sex. Our understanding of sexual dimorphism in Neanderthals seems to be that their sexual dimorphism was opposite of ours, that their females were actually larger than their males. And it seems that most of the skeletons that we thought were female, due to the wearage to the bone that shows things like hunting and stuff like that, are actually female skeletons, not male skeletons. So it does also appear that it might be that the female of the Neanderthal species are actually the hunters of the species, whereas the male of the Neanderthal species are smaller and more of the gatherer of the species. You can have me all to yourself on YouTube. That is absolutely correct. I am over on YouTube. I don't even think Dan's over there anymore. If you're over on YouTube, you get me all to yourself. Um, okay, so I think, thank you, Susan. Dumping a bunch of cake batter and or making a bunch of cake batter and then pouring it into different pans. They all come from the same bowl. But some pans have more strawberry or chocolate than others. That's very true. I'm only so patient because if I'm not patient, TikTok actually bans me. So I do have to state that I am probably I'm an extremely kind person. I am definitely one of those people who constantly is worried how they're being taken. As a neurodivergent person, I am absolutely constantly worried that people don't see me as being a kind and giving person. I really try very hard. That to me is actually what it takes to be a decent human being, is to be kind to other people and to try and take care of other people. That's how I was raised to believe was moral and ethical. Being raised outside any church, I was actually given those morals and ethics because I was actually taught that it really didn't matter who the fuck you were. We all deserved kindness. And I will be extremely kind until I'm not, until you've just pissed me off enough, or I'm passionate enough about a subject, or I'm angry enough. And then I can be extremely eviscerating Like, I can eviscerate you with my words very easily. I have a lot of really good words. I was taught a lot of really good words. I was given a very broad vocabulary at an extremely young age, tested out of all of that shit by the time I was in, like, late middle school. They wanted me to graduate. So I can eviscerate with words. TikTok, on the other hand, does not like it when I do that, and I have a tendency to get banned. Um, the books that I am writing, the things that I will be publishing outside of things like TikTok will probably not be as kind, just to state. I'm probably not going to um, sweeten my opinions on people's horrific behavior as much as I try to in here so that I can ensure in here that I am A, heard, and B, don't get another live ban because, anything that I give them to try and ban me on, they're going to, right? Um, I feel like that's weird. Okay. Um, Legos is a good analogy too. Hey, sugars. So Neanderthal actually is the first. Well, Homo heidelbergensis is the first that's found in Britain, and that's all of Britain as far as I know. So as far as I know, Neanderthal really populated Britain. They had to leave Britain in an ice age. So first, Britain is attached to like France through what we call Doggerland, right? That the English Channel has actually been above water for half of its life. And so while it was above water, they were able to cross over into Britain and they were able to populate Britain, not Ireland, but Britain. And then after the Ice Age, like 100 and something thousand years ago, they had to move out of Britain because it got covered in ice. And then when that ice age ends, Doggerland is no longer there. The English Channel is there. And so they're not able to cross back into Britain. So we actually see our earliest finds of Neanderthal are actually in Britain at 600,000 years ago. But what we see is that they have to leave and they never make it back. And then we see this extended period of time where there's nobody there. And then Homo sapien makes it back about 14,000 years ago. Okay. So let me go ahead and move on into. Uh, you know what? I don't want to be in here too much longer today. So I'm going to go ahead and open this back up. Oh, wait, that's not the one I wanted to do. Sorry. My buttons don't. I'm just not smart with it. I'm going to go ahead and open this back up really quick. Let me know. Australians, women, or Europe? Would you like me to talk about Australians, women, or Europe next? And that will probably be the last conversation today. And then this week we'll be going deeper into some different content that I have found. Women, Australia. Okay. I'm going to count down till 5, and then I'm going to turn it off and count them. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let me go ahead and turn it. Oh, it won't. It's going to wait for a second. It does look. Oh, I see a lot about the women. So, and we talk a lot on the other ones too. Okay, so we're going to go with the women. That seems to be the one that I'm seeing the most. I will pull over other things later. So if that's what you like, they will come out later. It's just we're gonna not be in here too much longer today, just because my timeline is so off today. So and thank you. I have a couple of degrees in this field, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Things change in my field all the time, so I might not always know what I'm talking about. And I welcome new information if you have it. I've taken some during this, but you know, I do know a little bit of what I'm talking about. So this latest find actually came across and post. Probably everybody saw this latest find as this really cool new necklace. Sorry, my internet kind of shuts. As this cool new necklace find, right? There was this find that everybody's like, oh my God, there's this beautiful, rich find that we found in England. And we're going to, really go on about this one. What they weren't showing until a little bit later is actually what this necklace is actually meaning. And so we're going to go into that just a little bit here today. And I'm trying to pull it up again so that I can have the pictures for you, because it's actually pretty cool. What they're seeing is that we have a burial of a woman. Um, um, there we go. We have a burial of a woman that's about 1400 years ago, circa 630 to 670 CE. And what we're seeing with this is this beautiful necklace. This is found in Britain, Northampton, England. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the necklace. We have these two views that are actually, this is actually the necklace itself. As you can see, it's a little worn. And you can see here that there's little chunks of red and stuff that show inlay. And you can see that these are kind of worn down. This is a recreation of it. You can see where they have, this is actually a recreation. You can see where they've put the inlay in again. You can see these inlays. You can see the coins, the faces on the coins here. You can kind of see here this inlay and here this inlay. Same here, right? Looks like they got these a little out of order here, right? Because that's a coin instead of the green inlay. And here it's got the green inlay and then a coin, right? But we see this. And then the other thing that we see is this. This is a cross. This is an early cross. They haven't pulled this out yet. This is all LiDAR so far. The cross itself is LiDAR. And this is a huge, beautiful, and I believe that they believe it's a golden cross. Silver cross, large silver cross, 2 decorative pots, and a shallow copper disc. Cross has deteriorated, but its shape remains visible on X-ray image taken of the soil surrounding the grave. They also, these silver faces were decorating the cross. So what we're seeing here, look at that. Like, look at the hair. Look at the, like, craftsmanship of this face in silver. So when we are looking at the space of early Christianity, the first thing that many people don't understand is that Christianity becomes a state religion from Rome about 4,000 years ago, or sorry, 400 CE, 4,000 years ago. It didn't even exist. 400 CE, we see that Christianity becomes a state religion of Rome. And what we see is that Constantine is part of what they call a triumvirate. It's 3 emperors. And Constantine no longer wants to be part of a triumvirate. So about 400 years earlier, this man who Rome was killing his people and had conquered his people, had tried to tell his people to overthrow Rome, had tried to tell his people, Rome is killing us. Stop giving your gold to, us, to the priest, and that's Caesar's gold, and start following our faith, right? Well, this got perverted by early Judeo-Christianity, and early Judeo-Christianity starts to see this kind of as a they take Jesus's words and twist Jesus's words into these words of submission. And so this becomes a slave's religion, and it becomes a woman's religion. The Romans don't have a lot of respect for women because they appropriate so many other cultures. They appropriate the Greeks' culture of toxic patriarchy that states that women are less. And this really comes from the fact that the Greeks were pedophiles who liked to assault young boys rather than women. They like to be intimate with young men rather than women. They called it mentorship. And so the Romans really take this practice over. And in this taking over of this practice, they also take over this hatred of women, this belief that women are somehow lesser. Patriarchy doesn't teach that. Patriarchy just means that the family line comes through the masculine line, just like matriarchy means that. You'll find that in a patriarchy or a matriarchy, that one gender might actually provide more leadership than the other gender. But you can even find a matriarchy where kings lead, right? Where the king's line comes through the mother's line. So instead of your son inheriting, your sister's son inherits, right? But all the leaders are men and it's still a matriarchy. You can find the same thing within patriarchy. But when we get to toxic patriarchy with the early Greeks, what we find is this need to, justify their shittiness again. And so uh, you find that when they're doing this, the Romans, they need to kind of just give these groups of people this reason to submit to a singular ruler in groups of people who have pantheons of deities. And so what they do is they adapt and appropriate Judeo Christianity, which is already at this point, again, a woman and a slave's religion. And so as they're taking this women and slaves religion into other areas, what they're doing is, um, first of all, because it's mainly women and slaves, you mainly see women and slaves doing everything. St. Patrick was a slave. That's why he became a Christian, was because he was enslaved. Um, and what you see is that most of these spaces are already led by women. You see that Cleopatra VII's daughter is Zenobia, or granddaughter, great granddaughter. I think she's 3, 4 generations down. She comes out of Selene's, Cleopatra's daughter, Selene. Cleopatra VII's descendant, Zenobia, uh, overthrows Roman rule in Palmyra. You see that Boudica leads the Celtic people in Britain to defeat the Romans soundly over and over and pretty much burn their city to the ground. You see that the greatest warrior grave we've ever found in Scandinavia is, in fact, a female. The greatest, highest ranking warrior of all of the Vikings was female. You see that the Scythian warriors are actually female. These are our Amazons. So we're looking throughout the world and we're seeing that women are actually in positions of leadership in all spaces that are not led by Romans, who again are appropriating Greek hate. So when you're sending out people to try and gather people to your faith outside of the state that you live in, the state religion that you live in, it makes total sense that you're sending out people who are going to be met on equal terms. If women are ruling and we're looking at a religion that you are mainly pushing on women and slaves anyways, because you want them to maintain meekness so that you can maintain control, then it's absolutely sensible that most of the leaders within the early church are women. And we actually see that most of the early martyrs are women, and most of the early martyrs are actually church leaders, right? And so women leading in the early church is actually pretty common. It's not until later that we get this idea that women don't lead, right? It's now understood that Mary Magdalene was actually another one of his disciples, and that there was actually a large contingent of female disciples that followed Jesus, right? That the ultra patriarchy that we see today in ultra Orthodox Judaism is not an ultra patriarchy that we saw in that time in Judaism, right? And so even the Judaic people did not follow this shaming of women as lesser, right? Um, and so it's not until you get that perversion coming along later. Again, this is all to maintain control, just like they eradicate science and just like they eradicate medicine, just like we've gone from a triumvirate to a singular emperor who never converts. This is all about maintenance of control over common people. This is all about othering. And if I can find a way to make you believe that you should follow me no matter what I do to you, then I can destroy you without caring. And you'll stay subservient to me. So this latest find really gives us this very in your face example of the fact that women are leading in the early church. Just like at this time, women are leading everywhere. I'll go ahead and open that up a little bit, and then I'll probably go ahead and take off. Again, I'm a little bit past my time today because I came in a little bit late. Um, I will be back tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Um, and then I will be back again Friday morning at 8 a.m. if AMs are better for you. Again, this is Pacific Standard Time. I probably will not be providing a bunch of other content over the next couple of weeks because I'm working on publishing a couple of things over the next couple of weeks. And so I should have a start of some free publications over the next couple of weeks for people. 5 KYA means 5,000 years ago, and 18 KYA means 18,000 years ago. KYA means thousands of years ago, teach. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have been asked for different content and to do things in different ways. So I am going to start publishing kind of a small pamphlet series or a small chapter series on things that I can't really discuss in here. I don't really get political in here. And so most of this will be a little bit more political. And so I'll be touching on things that I can't really touch on in a TikTok live. Oh, cool. I don't know, Kenzie. So when I publish, I will be putting the links to the publications on my link tree in my bio. And when I publish, it will all be free content. I felt great about it the day that I was out of breath. It has nothing to do with how I feel about it, really, honestly. Though I do have to say that keeping comments off for the vast majority is very helpful. And I think pretty much everybody, even my adult oldest daughter, who I've never heard actually speak in here, is like, oh, I watch your lives. I'm so happy you turned off the comments because they were bad. So, oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Zoe. I mean, the name sounds familiar, but it doesn't mean I know her. Like I know a couple Kenzies, I think. Yeah, and I'm not going to unfortunately legacy get into that today, but I will bring it up tomorrow night when I will be back at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Europe was not white. Light skin is a recent adaptation. So we do have genetics for it that go back 9,000 years, but being, or 900,000 years, but being a predominant part of population. So if something is mainly Black, what we're looking at is that it's not until 5,000 years ago that 50% of the population within Europe is light skin. Up until then, what you see is that the vast majority of the population is dark of skin. You see that as they move into the area, they adapt light eyes first, and then they adapt dark of skin or light of skin. We see that when Scandinavia is settled at 7,000 years ago, Scandinavia is settled by a group that is dark skinned and blue eyed, and a group that is light skinned and brown eyed, which would be the Sami people that are there today. So what we see is that Europe was very much mainly Black for quite some time. At about 5,000 years ago, we see about 50% of the population is white. And then about 2,000 years ago, we see about 70 to 80% of the population. And about 1,000 years ago, we see about 90% of the population is light of skin. Even in the sagas, you will see several examples of people with dark skin. And in those examples of people with dark skin, our most famous figures of the sagas have dark skin. Egil is dark of skin, and he is described not only him as being dark of skin, but his family line as being dark of skin. So, dark skin really is predominant throughout North Europe until very recently. And this really comes to the fact that you need to adapt the eye color for a low light environment before you need to adapt the skin color for a lack of vitamin D, because you can get vitamin D in other things. What book was this that I just pulled up? The Sagas of the Icelanders. It's just translated. I'm not sure who the translation is. Preface, introduction. Oh, translators: Katrina Atwood, George Clark, Ruth Ellison, Terry Gunnell. It's just the Sagas of the Icelanders. Yeah, they're not light. They're not light when they leave Africa. How are you light when you leave Africa, right? Well, and the other thing is light skin is not an advantage. So, for something to be an advantage to a species, it has to work in every area that the species is in. Dark skin works in every area that our species is in, and light skin does not. Done. Unfortunately, if you think that insulting people and people's looks means that you can't hear their intelligence or their passing on of intelligent information, then that is an ethical failing in you. And you don't get to dictate how I worship and decorate myself according to my worship. And the idea that you do again is an ethical failing in you. Get over yourself, disgusting, nasty ass that you are. Anyways, I am going to go ahead and take off. I will be back tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I know the stuff in comments always get me. It's like, come on, bitch, really? Like, really? And let's be real. It's never people who work in a professional field. Anybody working in a professional field knows that I can have tattoos on my neck and have nose rings. It's never anybody that works in a professional field that has a problem with it. It's the assholes sitting in their mama's basement because they couldn't make a dime if they saved their lives with it. Those are the only ones who ever get childish enough to care. It is actually COVID, kid. It takes 100 generations or 2,500 years for an adaptation. Just saying. It is. It is. Those are like, the actual facts of science that it takes 100 generations or 2,500 years for Homo sapiens, because 25 years is a generation for Homo sapiens. It takes 100 generations for any adaptation. Have a great one, everybody. I will see you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Talk to you later. Have a great one. I will see you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. I'll go ahead and stream again on here tomorrow. Hold on. I've got my camera way over here so I can TikTok my camera as well. I'll go ahead and stream over here tomorrow as well. And make sure that you guys can access it easily. Have a great day. Have a great couple of days. My camera does not like me. Here we go. Have a great couple of days. And I'll see you again soon. Bye. Make funny faces at you till I go.